Starting in the Western Big Six, we're starting with United Township. Head coach Nick Welch and the Panthers 1-8 a year ago. Offensively, they returned 4 starters on the line. They also have 3-year starters at quarterback, 3-year starter at wide receiver as well, that being Matthew Kelly and Corey Randall. So there's some pieces there. But last year, Dazzle, I'll start with you. Last year was certainly it was disappointing because, going back to the COVID spring where there was all the United Township hype. The year after that, they fell, I think, a game short of the playoffs. And then this really seemed to kind of derail them. But what do you see here? There's some pieces coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. Boy, they had me. I remember doing the podcast last year, and they had me bought in. And I think, well, I can't say. I think when you start with United Township, you have to start with like what the culture is now, what the program is now, because it wasn't that long ago when you started. You wouldn't start with talking about United Township first. And we're not saying we're ranking them out or anything like that, but they weren't the focus of the Western Big Six. And while they haven't won a conference championship or anything like that yet, the program is much better respected around the area. Coach Welch has done an awesome job. There's a good culture there. There's a good excitement. But yeah, last year, I think we did this podcast maybe the day after I went over to camp to do our score preview with United Township, and I was bought in. I think last year, if anything, because looking at it, Greg, 1-8. I mean, I knew they struggled. I didn't realize it was 1-8. I don't think if you would ask me, hey, what was the record? I would have said 2-7, maybe 3-6. But I think they were a year too soon last year. And sometimes, they played a lot of sophomores, and it doesn't just automatically click. We're going to talk about another team later on the Western Big Six with Genesee, who's kind of the same way, but it doesn't just click right away going from sophomores to juniors. And I think too much was, I don't want to say expected because you're going to have lofty expectations, but I think it didn't click as quickly as people think or thought it would. But when you look at that up front and you return 4 players and Swag Kelly comes back at quarterback and somebody that we're used to, calling his name and all that kind of stuff, and they have weapons. My question is defensively, and I know you'll talk a little more about that too, but they got to get better on the defensive side of the football. And I think they've struggled there a few, like that really good year where the spring COVID, they put up a ton of points, but they were outscoring people. And I think they can be good on that side of the football. I think they have young players coming back that will be good on that side of the football, but you have to, I guess this year I'm going to pump the brakes just a second because I was so excited last year. I love what Coach Welch is doing, but you got to see it on the field, and they have the pieces there. It looks good on paper, and they're going to be ready on Friday nights when it comes to an energy and enthusiasm. But we'll see what they do and how they get started against a LaSalle Peru team. I think it's at home this year. Remember, they got off to a tough start last year at LP. See if they can get off to that better start. I think things just snowballed quickly, it seemed like, with United Township last season.
Yeah, I mean, Coach Welch referenced, needing to stay healthy, and he also referenced that fast start that you just talked about and improved defensive play. So, those are the kind of talking points that he's seeing as well. The same things that we're seeing on this side of things. Like I mentioned, Matthew Swag Kelly, as we heard the nickname last year, he comes back with, he had a lot of offensive yardage for him last year, and he's back. Corey Randall is a dynamic playmaker. When he gets the ball in his hands, he can really make some things happen. He's a kid that I'm excited to see how they utilize, how they get him in space, how they help him, be a mainstay in this offense this year as a senior. And then Isaiah Navarrete, a running back who's only a sophomore, but he'll be in the mix, figures to get some time. And the returning linemen, couple 3-year starters in Jacob Vandeweely and Aaron Clifford, and then Andy Adame at right tackle, a senior 2-year starter. So there's experience there kind of all across the board. Cuff, what's your thoughts on UT?
Well, the first thing they did right was get Loyola off their schedule. That was just a terrible game for them to play last year. And I know they needed a game, but they have a bye right now in week 8, and they didn't pick up Loyola. So that was good. I think they need to get Corey Randall the ball whenever they can. Like you said, he's a dynamic player. I don't know if you switch him from wide receiver to running back or some kind of H-back where he can catch the ball out of the backfield. I think he's got to be a guy that touches the ball. If you have a 10-yard drive or a 10-play drive for a touchdown, he better touch it 4 or 5 times. if you're going to do something on this team. And Matt mentioned the culture. That's the biggest thing Nick Welch has really turned around with United Township, is he turned that culture around. Despite the season they had last year, the kids were still all bought in. There was none of that fighting on the sidelines. They were all for one another. They were still playing for one another despite the record that they had. And you don't want to put too much the cart before the horse here, but looking at their schedule, if they can get that win in week 1, they have a potential to win 5 games this year, I think.
Yeah. Yep. Stock or
yeah, it all goes back to Kelly. Last year he had a game against Galesburg where he threw for 311 yards. And when you look at UT, they had the last 3 games and 4 of their last 5, they scored 31 points or more. But like Dazzo said, their defense was their downfall. They gave up 63 points twice last year. So, but getting back to UT, they open at home with LP. Last year, LP's quarterback was a senior who was the coach's kid. He's graduated. I heard LP's changing their offense. Shaw local newspapers out of LaSalle talked about that LP may be changing their offense. If UT can win that, they have a very winnable game against a Chicago Public League school. They could go into the opener against Sterling 2-0. And if they don't play week 8 in the view of the state, because the Pioneers don't have a team because they're laying out, that's going to be a win. So they could start off, they could have 3 wins, and all they have to do is win 2 Western Big 6 games, which I think they could do. So 5 games is not a playoff bid for UT, is not out of the cards. And had there been playoffs in that COVID year, UT would have been a playoff team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Chuck, anything on UT?
Well, I would echo what Dazzo said about the culture. I think Coach Welch does a great job there. And it's a different UT program than it was a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at it and go, you still got to prove something to me. 2 years ago, they started out 3-0. There was a lot of hype, a lot of talk about how good they were. They came to Quincy, gave up 48 points to a Quincy team that went 4-5 that year and didn't do anything after that. Then they go 1-8 last year. Okay. There's a lot of talk again now. A lot of, we got some experience. We got this. Prove it to me. Prove it to me that you're a different UT team. Right now, we haven't seen it fulfilled yet. I think Coach Welch will get it done. I really do. I think he's a great coach, a great guy. I think he's really changed the culture there, but he's got to prove it to us.